$3 million pot that Tom Dwan is fighting for. The biggest pot on televised cash games, and we get right in the action.
It's a weird spot.
So raise from Hank, a 3-bet from Wesley. Don't know what Dwan has, but is going to 4-bet. And Doug is watching because he knows what Wesley has, and Wesley has just 5-bet to 275,000. Action back over to Dwan. And there's the call from Dwan. If you're not watching, come back to your screen right now. Over $500,000 in the pot. We haven't seen a flop yet.
They're playing very deep. What we need to consider here is it might appear as, hey, they play 1,400 big blinds, right? Because the blinds are 401k. They have 1.4 million stacks effectively. But if we consider the antes, it decreases the stack to pot ratio, meaning they're somewhat playing effectively the 230, 250 big blind poker in terms of the stack to pot ratio, because there is a big blind ante in play. Now, if we look at the pre-flop ranges, we have to make some assumptions. Out of position, I would give Dwan such a 4-betting range. He would probably 4-bet a few more hands, like some suited aces, but none of them continue. Ace queen off might also fold, but cash games can always be a little bit looser, so I let some ace queen offs in there. He traps sometimes aces, I think 10s plus, and then calling a 4-bet, especially being that deep, is very reasonable to assume. In position, also very difficult to say. I think something like this, maybe there could be some more random suited aces. But again, ranges get very, very tight if you play a 5-bet pot. So I think for a live cash game, that is very reasonable to assume. Let's move on.
8-8-3, 2 diamonds out there. Wesley does have the ace of diamonds. Wesley just asked Dwan how much he had behind, and that got the whole table quiet. Wesley bets 125,000. There's the call from Dwan. Pot now 812,000.
And post-flop, it gets actually really, really interesting here. In-position player has more aces than the out-of-position player, which is very important across all of the board textures. And we see on 8-8-3, he wants to bet his full range. And we actually see that Dwan starts folding king. Why? Yes, he also blocks kings, but he blocks more combos of ace-king. And ace-king is a significant part of villain's bluffing range in position. However, if you don't think your opponent is ever 5-betting ace-king pre-flop, then we continue with kings, because then kings becomes more valuable blocking your opponent's pocket kings, and then you're only beat by aces. I would never fold kings here. We see that the in-position player has ace-king, so we should consider some ace-kings in his range. Now, I think all of the overpairs wants to call once. We start folding ace-queen. We call a little bit with the ace-queen and diamonds, but we see it's also very reasonable to fold. So we only essentially continue with some of the ace-kings, ace-king and diamonds, of course, and ace-queen and diamonds as well.
Dwan with about 1.1 million behind. Turn a blank. Wesley's hands are shaking, and it looks like he is loading up for another bet. 350,000 over to Dwan. Pot has got 1.2 million in it. The table has not been this quiet for 4 days. 1.2 million in there already. If Dwan calls this, we'll have one of the biggest pots we've ever seen, and still a river to come. And there's the call.
The turn is a 5. We check again. Again, we do have the nut disadvantage. We have fewer aces combos. Also, you know, the in-position player, the one who 4-bets or then puts in the 5-bet on top of that, usually can have a few more random hands, maybe, you know, and king 8 suited or ace 8 suited, you know, especially lives, that can happen. Dwan shouldn't be having any of these hands. Maybe he floats with 9-8 suited, but typically when you want to 5-bet out of position, 4-bet out of position, you want to have strong blockers. You want to have an ace queen, an ace king. You want to block those aces kings. I don't think Dwan is going to fuck around here with 9-8 suited or something like that, so I think it's very, very unrealistic. On this turn, We see that the in-position player wants to remain quite aggressive, even the ace-5s. It's not bad, you know, to clear out some equity against the ace-kings and ace-queens that floated. Maybe Dwan starts folding some jacks and tens. On the turn, it actually is very interesting that now kings starts pure folding. Again, I wouldn't necessarily assume that my opponents are barreling it off with ace-king here. I think most of them would check back. So in any other games, whether live or online, I think we should always call kings here. And then we continue with our overpairs and only ace, king, and diamonds. In fact, we start shoving some of them. Now, the river is the tricky part.
The river's a 6. Wesley with just ace high.
Check.
Dwan checks it one more time.
All in.
There's the all in.
He said all in?
He said all in.
For sure? Look at this.
Said on.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna get a water.
Pot has got 2.3 million in there. Wesley is just triple barreled with ace king.
What the fuck?
He's got queens. There's the call.
Hey, call.
Call.
Tom Dwan has just won the biggest pot in the history of televised poker. $3.1 million.
And this is where it becomes a guessing game. If you think your opponent is crazy, if you have any kind of live reads, which Dawn apparently has, you have to flick in a call. Sometimes you cannot just call with aces, otherwise, you know, you would get exploited. And these games, people can be crazy, you know, make crazy plays, and probably Dwan had a read, and we see that you also, as the in-position player, you want to be shoving some of these ace-king combos. We see that not having the ace and diamonds is pretty good. You know, we want to unblock some of these ace-king diamond combos. But apart from that, ace-king spades, ace-king hearts is fine to sometimes rip it in. And then Dwan has a guessing game. Of course, kings, aces, and kings are the value shoves we have. And then Dwan is basically ending up in a guessing game. It doesn't really matter which combo he has, queens, jacks, tens, all of them are basically break even against reasonable bluffing range, and then it's up to you to make a decision, or up to Tom Dwan, based on your reads, based on live tails. And we see we flick in the call with queens. Actually, queens, jacks, tens is a better call than kings. Kings is here a clear fold, because we know that our opponent's most likely bluffs are going to be coming from ace, king. And you might think, well, Ben, but we also block kings. No, kings is only 6 combinations. Ace, king in total, if we take all combinations, 16 combinations. So if you have kings, you block more bluffs than more value. But you should never bluff with a queen. You don't block any value as well, but at least you also don't block any bluffs. And that's the goal when you bluff catch. You don't want to block any bluffs. Queens, jacks, tens, unblock all the bluffs. Therefore, better call with kings. He flicks in the call and he scoops a massive pot. But also big respect for pulling off such a big bluff. I don't think anyone would have ever expected him to show up with a bluff there. Maybe Dwan has the reads, has the history with him, but it was a big boy bluff, I can tell you that. And I was very surprised to see that hand develop in the first place, because usually it goes 3-bet, 4-bet, and then call, and not playing a 5-bet pot for so many chips. And then usually they would also check it back with ace king on any of these streets. No, not these boys. They're just flicking in the money and going for the big boy bluffs, but also the big boy hero calls.